Hey guys, Mike here. In this video, I'm going to give my criticisms of the Elden Ring DLC. And for my original review, I gave Elden Ring DLC a 10 out of 10. However, I think there are some flaws with the game that should be improved on. Now, just as a backstory, I played it on a release date. I beat it in 2 days. I played all the Souls games and all their DLCs. I actually think all the Souls games are pretty easy. Even their DLCs are pretty easy. This was the first time I actually thought the DLC was quite hard, that even normies would have a really hard time, and some probably will just give up. But I think anyone can beat it if they just keep at it, even though it might take you a really long time. So I have 3 major criticisms with the game. 2 are technical, 1 is more gameplay based. So the first gameplay criticism I have is that the boss progression is extremely annoying and unfun. Now, when bosses attack this fast and with such long combos, sure, you can dodge it all and learn the dodges, and eventually you'll be able to learn it and beat it. But as far as the experience of doing that, of that first time progression goes, it is just not fun. When I was doing these bosses, like, okay, these bosses are hitting way too much. They're just throwing out too many attacks. I can't get a read on them. They do one combo, and then now you have to deal with this next combo, which I didn't even learn yet. So how you deal with that is you just get a shield, a medium shield or a great shield. You invest in guard, boosting, abilities. There's a cracked tier for your flask that can pretty much eliminate stamina drain on what they call perfect guards. It's similar to Liza P, where if you get a good guard, then you get rewarded for that. But in the case of Elden Ring DLC, you just don't get stamina loss, and that's incredibly powerful for guard. The whole point of guarding is that you're taking a stamina hit, but if you can just get a reasonably good guard and not take any stamina hit, not only do you have stamina in time for punishing and doing a counterattack on the boss, but you just don't get affected, because pretty much every shield or any good shield provides 100% damage reduction on guard. And you can just patch up the magic and fire damage and holy damage with items, so that way you're not taking too much chip damage. So guard is really strong. It's really strong for progression, and that's pretty much how I progress all the bosses. I'm not an idiot who's going to try and roll and jump around and dodge every single boss attack when I can just guard it. And the issue with that is that it really limits the amount of builds that you can use for progression, because you're not going to jump in to the Elden Ring DLC with your mage that has no shield. I mean, if you're going to run a mage, just go in with a shield. There's a lot of magic shields that mages can take advantage of that they should definitely be using, especially for blind progression. And dodging in Elden Ring is actually nerfed compared to Dark Souls 3. I believe the recovery on the dodge is much higher. And the reason they did that was because they really wanted to emphasize roll punishing. And I think that's a good gameplay design, but I think some of the boss animations are quite egregious, and they just look kind of goofy when they do this really slow swing just to catch you for a roll punish. If the visuals look kind of weird, it just kind of breaks my immersion. It just feels like a very artificial design for the boss, so it just doesn't make it seem believable. Like, I'm not willing to suspend my disbelief for the boss fight. I feel like I'm fighting a developer rather than an actual NPC or a boss or something in the game. The next point is healing is really annoying in this game. I think healing is too slow, and it's kind of grandfathered in from the old Souls games, especially Dark Souls 3. And because the bosses attack so fast, there's not really a time to heal, but most of the tryhards will say, oh, well, that means you just have to dodge the boss's next attack after you took damage, and then you get a chance to heal. And that's true from a get good perspective, but from a progression perspective, it just doesn't feel good. And one game I don't really like, but I still respect in a lot of regards, is Liza P. And Liza P, I feel, did it right, because they had the Bloodborne speed healing, and even if you got hit by a boss in Liza P, there was plenty of opportunities to just pop a very quick Bloodborne style heal and just get the heal off, just so you could see the next moves that the boss throws at you. With Elden Ring, that's not the case. You're just punished way too hard for trying to heal and just to progress the fight. And again, that just makes it unfun. Now, is this a problem on subsequent playthroughs and when you're doing challenge runs and when you already know the boss? Not really, I would say. But again, most people are not going to do subsequent runs, and a large majority of the player base is only going to do the first playthrough. And if you kind of screw up that first playthrough and the experience with that first playthrough, I don't think that really makes for a very good game experience. Another criticism I have of the boss progression is that the Okizeme gameplay is just way too oppressive. Like, if the boss knocks you on the ground, all you have to do is wait for the boss to try and hit you while you're on the ground and then roll out of it. And that's the proper way to Okizeme. But the issue is that a lot of the boss attacks were designed to not be rolled out of. So for example, like if it's a quick 1-2, that second attack is going to hit you out of the roll, which is basically like a roll catch. So if your only option on the ground is to roll or Okizeme roll, then in some cases you're just dead. There's nothing you can do. If the boss's RNG decides to throw out that attack that is designed to punish roll and roll catch, and your only option is to roll Okizeme roll, then you're just dead. And again, this plays into my point that boss progression is miserable and the punish for getting knocked on the ground is just way too high. One example of this is Commander Gaius. When he does the charge attack, you pretty much can't roll that attack, or it's extremely, extremely strict to get a successful iframe roll on it. If the only thing you can do is roll because you were knocked on the ground and he decides to do that charge attack, you're just pretty much dead. The next criticism I have of the game is related to the buttons and the controller inputs. I feel that with the Elden Ring DLC, it is long overdue that they decouple the sprint and the dodge button, because how dodge works is that there's, I think, like a half a second window where when you press the dodge button, it is checking to see if you release the button, and if you do release the button within that window, you will get a dodge. Your character will dodge. So it's basically detecting the up press on the dodge button before the dodge is initiated. And the reason it waits that long is because if it exceeds that time window, then that means it determined that you're still holding the button and you are activating a sprint instead. Now, because Elden Ring DLC bosses are just way too fast, I feel like this delay or this way that the sprint and dodge operates is just so outdated and doesn't really match up to Elden Ring's speed of gameplay. Now, what I would like to see for future games, and I think this would actually fix a lot of issues, is if you're going to make the bosses that fast in Elden Ring, then just decouple the sprint and the dodge button, because when you do that, you're able to initiate a dodge on a down press rather than an up press. And that way, it just feels better to input into the controller. And I think people would be less likely to complain about a lot of BS things that happen. Like what happens is a lot of players report, oh, that was BS that I got hit by that. Or it was BS, I should have totally dodged that. And it's just the jankiness of this up-down press related to the coupling of the sprint and the dodge button. So if they want to do fast bosses, just decouple those buttons. All right, the last thing I have a criticism of is the frame rate. Now, for action games and action RPG games, I will modify my setting so that I get a smooth, buttery 60 frames per second, because I need all those frames to play these games comfortably. I do not have an issue with any other games running at 60 frames per second, 1080p. In fact, my PC can actually handle some games at 1440p with DLSS and still maintain that 60 frame rate. But with Elden Ring, that is not the case. At 1080p, my frames were dropping into 38 frames, especially for the final boss fight when all of those effects came on the screen. And I was expected to dodge that. It just does not work. Don't get me wrong, the boss fight looks beautiful, but when you're sacrificing frames like that for a very demanding action game, it's just not worth it. And they need to fix that. I suspect that the reason why the frames drop like this is because of the anti-cheat. Now, I don't have any proof of this, but usually when there's an anti-cheat in the game, this is when I see issues with frames, because it's like affecting the game's computing or the threads or something like that. I'm not a expert in that, but I do suspect it has something to do with the anti-cheat. These are my major criticisms of the Elden Ring DLC. As someone who's beat the game really fast, and I still give it a 10 out of 10, I feel like if they fix these, I would be more accepting of the extremely hard difficulty that was presented in this DLC pack, and I would probably not even really complain that much about the extremely difficult blind first playthrough progression. Still a really good game. If they fix these, which they probably won't because the game's already really successful. Again, would like to see this in their future games, especially the decoupling of the sprint and the dodge button. But nonetheless, still enjoyed my time. I really like the story, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.